Have you noticed something that's becoming harder and harder to ignore? Every week, it feels like there's another piece of positive news for XRP. We hear about new partnerships, growing institutional interest, advancements on the XRP Ledger, and discussions around clearer regulations. Yet, after all of that, you open your portfolio, and the price barely moves. If you found yourself wondering what is actually going on with XRP, you're definitely not the only one. In fact, judging by the conversations happening across the XRP community, this has become one of the biggest questions investors are asking today. And honestly, it's understandable, because after wading through years of legal battles, market crashes, and endless predictions, many holders expected that good news would finally translate into meaningful price action. Instead, every rally seems to lose momentum, every breakout gets questioned, and every delay makes people wonder if they're missing something. Some investors have reached the point where they're asking a much bigger question: is XRP really being held back? Or have our expectations simply become unrealistic? That's exactly what we're going to explore today. Not with hype, not with unrealistic price targets, and definitely not with promises that nobody can keep. Instead, let's look at what's really happening beneath the surface and why understanding that could completely change the way you view XRP. Because here's something I've learned after watching financial markets for years. Price doesn't always tell the whole story. Sometimes the market can look incredibly quiet while important developments are happening behind the scenes. Other times, prices explode long before the average investor even realizes why. That's why relying only on the daily chart can become dangerous. Every small dip feels like proof that something is wrong. Every small pump feels like the beginning of a new bull run. And before long, emotions start making decisions that logic should be making. This is exactly where many XRP holders find themselves today. Some people are losing patience, others are buying more. Some have completely stopped checking the charts. And some are asking whether they should move their money into assets that seem to be performing better. None of these reactions are surprising. When an investment tests your patience for this long, doubt naturally starts to grow. But here's the interesting part. The biggest frustration I keep seeing isn't actually about the price itself. It's about the disconnect. People aren't saying, "Why isn't XRP at $100?" They're asking something much more reasonable. Why doesn't the price react when so much positive news keeps coming out? That's a fair question. And the answer is much more complicated than most headlines make it seem, because markets don't move based on good news alone. If they did, investing would be easy. Everyone would simply buy after positive announcements, and prices would rise forever. But that's not how financial markets work. Markets are driven by expectations, liquidity, timing, investor psychology, and sometimes factors that have nothing to do with the news dominating social media that day. That's why one project can announce incredible developments and barely move, while another asset jumps 20% on nothing more than speculation. Understanding that difference is one of the biggest mindset shifts any investor can make. Because once you stop expecting every headline to create an immediate price explosion, you start paying attention to something much more important: whether the long-term story is actually improving. And that's where things become really interesting for XRP. One of the biggest mistakes investors make is believing that good news should immediately lead to a higher price. It sounds logical, doesn't it? If a company announces progress, you'd expect its stock to rise. If a blockchain continues adding new features, attracting developers, or gaining attention from institutions, you'd naturally expect its token to follow. But financial markets are rarely that simple. In reality, markets often move ahead of the news or long after the news. Sometimes the biggest price moves happen before the average investor even understands why they're happening. Other times, positive developments seem to be completely ignored, at least in the short term. That's why so many XRP holders feel confused. They see headlines about growing adoption, improvements to the XRP Ledger, and increasing conversations around regulatory clarity. Yet they look at the chart and think, why isn't any of this making a difference? The truth is, markets don't reward information the moment it becomes public. They reward expectations. If traders have already anticipated a positive event, the news itself may have very little impact. In investing, there's an old saying: buy the rumor, sell the news. While it doesn't apply to every situation, it reminds us that markets often price in expectations long before headlines reach the public. There's another factor that many people overlook: investor psychology. After years of waiting, many XRP holders have become emotionally exhausted. Every failed breakout, every delayed catalyst, and every period of sideways price action slowly chips away at confidence. Eventually, something interesting happens. People stop asking, "How high can XRP go?" They start asking, "Will it ever move at all?" And that shift in mindset is powerful because it's exactly when frustration begins to influence decision-making. Some investors sell not because their original reasons for buying have changed, but because they're simply tired of waiting. Others jump into whatever asset happens to be trending that week, hoping to recover lost time. Unfortunately, chasing momentum has trapped countless investors throughout every market cycle. The hardest part isn't identifying opportunities. It's having the discipline to stick with a well-researched plan while the market tests your patience. That doesn't mean holding blindly forever. Every investor should regularly evaluate their investments, review new information, and make decisions based on facts, not emotions. If your reasons for owning an asset have fundamentally changed, it's reasonable to reassess. But if the only thing that's changed is your frustration, then it's worth asking whether emotion is starting to outweigh logic. History has shown that markets often create the greatest emotional pressure near periods of uncertainty. That's when confidence is low, headlines are mixed, and investors begin questioning decisions they once felt certain about. Again, this doesn't guarantee that XRP is about to make a major move. No one can honestly promise that, but it does highlight something important. Price and progress don't always move at the same speed. Real development often happens quietly. Infrastructure gets built, technology improves, businesses prepare, regulations evolve. Those changes rarely generate instant excitement on a price chart, but they can shape the foundation for future growth. Whether that future benefits XRP will ultimately depend on real-world adoption, market conditions, and how the broader crypto ecosystem evolves over time. So why isn't XRP moving? The simplest answer is this: progress and price don't always move together. Markets don't reward patience every day, and they certainly don't move on our schedule. Sometimes the biggest opportunities are built during the quietest moments, when most people have already given up. That doesn't mean XRP is guaranteed to succeed, and it doesn't mean a massive rally is right around the corner. No one can honestly promise that. But before making any emotional decision, ask yourself one question: has the long-term reason you invested in XRP actually changed? Or are you simply tired of waiting? For many investors, the answer to that question changes everything. Remember, successful investing isn't about predicting tomorrow's price. It's about making rational decisions while everyone else is reacting emotionally.